The Ringmaster's secret conclusions. You heard no more about Nancy Drew in the past 2 days than you thought you were going to. So why the Ringmaster's secret? Why Nancy Drew? I talked a little bit yesterday about the personal resonance of this book for me. I like it because it's a mystery, and I have a side life where I write mysteries set in a museum. And I like mysteries because I think they encourage critical thinking and problem solving, which is something you've seen all of these fantastic people here sitting in this row do in the past day and a half. I want to talk a little bit about my project. I particularly want to talk about my project after Emmanuel's, because there was a place I was trying to get to. So I think there's a place to talk about failure, and I'd like to talk a little bit about failure. I'm the director of something called the Wade Project. It's a project that's at the Western Reserve Historical Society in Cleveland. It's a 3-year project. It started in February 2014, but there's some background to it. In 2009, I left the Cleveland Museum of Art, which is the big 800-pound gorilla in Cleveland in terms of cultural institution, and I walked across the street to Case Western Reserve University, and I picked up my teaching again and started teaching museum studies. But I had lunch with a colleague of mine who's a historian, and I said, I'm really interested in how Americans felt about museums before there were museums in America. And he said, oh, you should come transcribe the Randall Wade travel journals because they're too fragile to scan. So I spent the next 3 years, 3 days a week, transcribing 900 plus pages of an 1870-71 travel journal, which was scanned just last year for $350. Don't even. So those are the journals up there. They're absolutely lovely journals. Randall Wade's handwriting is beautiful. So it was a pleasure, and my husband refers to Randall Wade as my dead husband. And I would come home and he would say, my real husband would say, what did you do today? Well, Randall and I went to Paris. It was just lovely. On the bottom is a monument in Lakeview Cemetery. This is Wade Chapel. And Wade Chapel was one of the largest chapels that Tiffany ever designed. He designed it for Jephthah Homer Wade II, who was one of the founders of the Cleveland Museum of Art. And the Wades are spread out all over the United States. There's Sedgwicks, there's Perrys, there's Stories, there's Wades, and whenever anyone dies, it doesn't matter where they're ultimately going to be buried, the family all comes back and they have a memorial service in Wade Chapel. So in 2013, in fall 2013, the family came back for Sis Sedgwick's memorial service, and they came to Western Reserve Historical Society, and I was invited to talk to them about the journals. At the end of that meeting in September, they said, we would like you to put together a project because our family papers are here, and we would like to make our family papers accessible online. Now, this is a historical society, so let me tell you a little bit. This is the Cleveland History Center at Western Reserve Historical Society. It is 40 historical structures. There's in 3 counties, 4.5 million photographs, 238 volumes, 12,000 hanging garments, 4,000 manuscripts, 158 vehicles, oxen, and a carousel. They have one IT person who does everything. So the family asked me to put together a small prototype project about something that could be done. And I said, well, the Jephthah Wade family papers have been microfilmed. What if we did a relatively inexpensive project for Historical Society and digitized from microfilm just to get the images available? That was the prototype project. So, purpose, let me talk to you about my purpose. So phase 1, I'm an art historian by training, I'm a reluctant historian, and I project manage digital projects since the early, I started to say 1890s, but I really mean the 1990s. So phase 1 of the project was to digitize 13,000 documents from microfilm, process new collections, and make the documents accessible via digital Case Western Reserve University. And in fact, we got a quote from Case Western Reserve University that the library was going to digitize those papers and make them accessible for $20,000. Phase 2, and I want you to notice how happy I look out of this picture. Phase 2 was to engage other institutions and family in the discussion of telling Cleveland's story above the institutions. Again, using just the Wade family as a prototype model, because they gave to at least 22 institutions in town that helped to build the health, education, welfare, and cultural infrastructure of Cleveland in the Gilded Age and Progressive era. But every institution wants to tell the Wade story their own way. And I said, so what if let's just take it up above the institution so scholars can find all the stories, right? Sounds reasonable. So we were going to get the documents digitized and use those to engage the other institutions in talking about a collaborative project and apply for a grant for a collaborative project, build a prototype, phase 3, evaluate the prototype, apply for grants for implementation, wash, rinse, and repeat. Anybody got any problems with my plan? That was the purpose. Passion. So the carrot on the end of the stick for me was at the end of it, I was going to get to write a book about the 3 generations of the Wade family members who helped create the cultural infrastructure in Cleveland. Pivots and persistence, or when passion isn't enough. Year 1, month 1, the CEO, the director under whom the project was initiated and for whom I was going to report directly to, left the institution. There is a brand new director. Month 3, the library partner says, oh, we're going to do a strategic planning process, so we can do this for you, but we can't do it until 4 years from now. Month 5, WRHS hires a new library director who was the digital librarian at the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia. Awesome, Richard Schrake. Month 9, CWRU library staff come over and train me and one person to digitize the 13,000 documents from microfilm. Year 2, month 3, the library director builds an open source repository to hold the materials. It's Linux-based on an Islandora repository. There I am pushing the rock up the hill. I did not expect to have to digitize the documents myself. Year 2, that's my phone, just ignore it. I didn't turn it up. Month 5, year 2, the library director leaves to take another position. Month 9, the 150th anniversary of the Historical Society requires an embargo on any grant applications that don't have anything to do with the anniversary. Year 2, month 10, the decision is taken not to support the repository. That's me in prison right there. Nevertheless, you know this. We digitized 13,000 documents from microfilm. I audited the microfilm, scanned the missing 250 from originals, processed 3 new collections, digitized 1,200 additional documents and 600 photographs from the collection, provided research, transcription, and digitization internships for 24 students from 10 colleges and universities, provided a postdoctoral candidate with a year's nest to do some original research, and she, of her own greatness, got her assistant visiting professorship position. We are hosting 400 additional collections on the repository, and last week the administration said we could hire someone to actually come in and update the repository and look at it and do things. So, you know, my goal, and it is now year 2, right? Year 2, month 8, year 3, month 8, my goal for this time was I would be calling Emmanuel and people and saying, Link, Jump, and Dana, you know, these institutions have all worked together. We are ready to do something fantastic. But I'm not. Nevertheless, I'm big on neverthelesses. I want to tell you about the passion part for me, because I love narrative and I love documents, and people in archives and people in history are real to me. This is a tale of 2 portraitists and how serendipity happens. I was here about a month and a half ago to do some work on an IMLS project, and wandering in the galleries, I came across this portrait of Dr. Thomas Nicholas Cockerell by Caleb Bingham. Bingham was born in 1811. He was a self-trained portraitist. Jeff the Homer Wade, who is the original founding father of the family that I study, I've been embedded in these 13,000 papers for 3 years now, started his career in upstate New York as a self-taught portraitist, and that's a painting that's by Jeff the Wade of a man named Nathaniel Olds in the Cleveland Museum of Art. He's wearing what are called argon glasses. There were these argon lights, and They were concerned about the fumes, and so they had these glasses, these strange sort of steampunk-looking glasses. Caleb Bingham, docents, how many docents? Caleb Bingham went on to become the founder of the Luminous movement. And there's the fantastic Indian encampment painting views. Jeff Oliver Wade left portrait painting. He had a bout of cholera, and then he had a bout of typhoid fever, and he felt like he needed to get out and exercise. And he became interested in the new telegraphy movement and got out and started building telegraph lines. And he was very charismatic, a very charismatic individual. And what he actually did was he went from Ohio to California and convinced every person along the way who owned a piece of the telegraph to work together. So Western Union is the Union of Western Telegraph Operators. And he made a little money along the way, which is why I have these papers. Now, I'm going to stop for a moment and tell you about Worthy McClintock. And Fenella touched on this yesterday. This is a parable of archival responsibility. I may not get through this without crying, but I tell the story to every audience. So, on Labor Day weekend 2012, I had just finished transcribing volume 2 of the journals, and I was happy, and I decided to do something else. And I needed some information on 19th century farming practices in Ohio. So I asked the archivist to pull a couple of collections for me. And she pulled some collections, and I sat down and I opened the first box and pulled it out, and it was just a little folder, no more than 22 pages. And I opened it up and I started reading, and it was a letter from a husband and a wife to their son Worthy. And it talked about life on the farm. The father said, you know, I don't even remember, we're harvesting now, and the pigs are doing fine, and the trees in the field are looking nice. And then the mother got on. The mother had just had her 40th birthday, and she'd been given a pen by her sister so she could write letters. And I stopped at that point, and I looked at what's called the finding date, which describes the collection, and the date was 1862. And the folder was thin. And at that point, I knew that the story was not going to end well. And the last letter in the folder is the American government telling the parents of Worthy's death in the Civil War. So I didn't skip to the back letter. When I saw what the date was, I said, you pulled the collection. You started the story. You finished the story. You tell the story. So I'm Worthy McClintock. You now own Worthy McClintock too. So don't go into archival collections. Do go for fun, but don't stay for fun. These are, even though they're dead, these are real people whose lives matter. And that's something that I take very much part. I don't know where I got my soapbox about that, except I feel that everybody ought to know about Worthy McClintock. That's not actually Worthy, but it's a soldier from a young soldier from the Ohio Regiment. He was 18 when he died, and he wanted one of his mother's cheeses for Christmas. So, I promised you a 5th P, right, yesterday? Those of us who are here. My first one is purpose, passion, pivots. I'm looking before purpose, passion, pivots, and persistence. At dinner last night, Brent suggested prayer might be my 5th P. It was good 5th P for you, but it is not actually my 5th P in this case. I had decided that my 5th P was going to be power. And this is the right money, man, power, and time. This is the pyramid of business. If you don't control those 3 things, you don't control a project. And if any one of those 3 change, right, if the time frame changes, then the money and the people have to change. So when I was grumpy, thinking about my project, when I'm grumpy, I think that power is the 5th P. Because I don't have control over the time or the money or the people at this point. But I really think that the 5th P is not there because it's people. And that's what I've taken away from all of the talks in the past day and a half. that it's the people who get you through this, it's the people conversing with one another, sharing ideas that make things work. It's the people that make me think that I may not do it the next 3 years, I may not do it the next 4 years, but eventually in Cleveland, we'll start telling those stories about the institutional level. And I can't remember who I was talking to this morning. I was talking to you, wasn't I? I said to somebody what my final slide was going to be, and I bet nobody expected that my final slide was going to be the Justice League from the 1960s. But I started thinking about that, and I realized that my favorite member of the original Justice League was Aquaman. Now, I think I liked him because he was buff and blonde, but that's a whole other thing. In the 60s, that's why I liked him. It amazes me that as a child I could fall in love with cartoon characters. Speed Racer? Oh. Aquaman, upon reflection, is my favorite superhero because I like his power best of all. What's his power? What? And what does he do? He calls. He calls when he needs help. And people come to him and help him. And I really just think that that is a great superpower. And I've got a row here of aqua people who, you know, you can tell and listen to them that they're skilled in doing that. My experience at the Gilcrease is you are a bunch of aqua people too. Everybody has been so lovely. And so that's what I have to say, except I guess I have one more slide. In 2014, the IMLS, the Institute for Museum and Library Services, which is made one of the major federal funding organizations for archives for museums and libraries, they fund archives too, but don't tell anyone, produced a publication called Museums, Libraries, and 21st Century Skills, and they identified these 4 skills: critical thinking and problem solving, creativity and innovation, communication and collaboration, and cross-disciplinary thinking as the key skills that people working in cultural heritage institutions need moving forward. And again, I think that's what you've seen in the past day and a half. So thank you to all the speakers, to Dr. Dwayne King, to Natalie Panther, to the many staff and volunteers who worked to make this a success, and to you, the audience. I'm so glad to have been here this weekend, and we're not quite done yet. We're going to bring our 3 speakers from this morning back up on the stage and have a little chat. All right? Oh, wait. I forgot to do something. I forgot to do 2 things at the beginning of my talk. The first one was, and now it's too late, Brent in the bathroom. There were a couple of women who said, I wish we could hear Brent's talk again. And I was going to offer to let you do that instead of my closing remarks. And the second thing is an apology. Thank you. You were all so kind and courteous yesterday when I showed the Shoshone Falls at Snake River and none of you threw anything to me. So I have been corrected and I apologize. So thank you very much. Take the stage. Thank you, Holly. This is not a fair question. The thing that is on your desk right now that is most exciting to you, the task that you have to do that is the most exciting thing, that brings you the most joy.
I'll start looking at me. Well, my favorite thing is working with people. I mean, there is just no denying this. I think, you know, yeah, there can be some painful times when you're just working with data, metadata, and CRM, but the conversations on finding solutions with people that work for more than one institution, that's just the best. I think we're entrusted, you know, with the physical objects, but also the knowledge about them, right? And so locking that down to one institution, that is just not fair to anyone. So kind of bridging the gaps and reaching out to good colleagues, and that's what I like the most.
I I think there are two main projects for me right now. We're in phase 2 of the IMLS project that Jesse is team leader on, where we are implementing our distance cataloging interface, the DCI, to work with native artists and archaeologists from a distance to help augment the cataloging of the ancient Mississippian ceramic vessels. And that's really very exciting to me. I love working with these native artists. The archaeologists are so fantastic. I'm learning so much. Objects are beautiful. And then the American Art Collaborative, working with Emmanuel and that whole team to learn to really catalog for the internet in this linked open data manner is really very exciting. So we're making some huge leaps forward with those.
I have a team in the lab back in Lexington, students, and I'm in the classroom this fall. I'm a professor, and interacting with those folks is amazing in the classroom and in the lab. And I have to say, I feel lucky that 18-year-olds will still talk to me, you know? And so I love that part of my job, being in university is very exciting. So we have data collections from a lot of different places that we haven't analyzed yet, just because of the time it takes. And knowing that my team will be even more enthusiastic about this week is something that I'm really excited to get back to.
All right, I know y'all have questions out there for the speakers, so we're going to open it up to you. Sir.
Okay, there was a term that kind of went over my head. It was the semantic web.
Emmanuel might be better to describe it, but it's another layer of the internet. Kind of lays on top.
That's yet another layer.
Do you want to amplify that a little bit?
I'm gonna try. So the internet, as we know it, mostly is just kind of a network where people will come and post documents, right? But those are just kind of the electronic version of your paper files, if you will, right? So the semantic web is the next step, where we're not looking at documents, we're trying to extract the meaning from those documents. And that's really what it's all about, right? So we're not pointing to a web page that can describe multiple different things, we're pointing to a concept. Yeah, relationships and concepts. So,
Example.
Examples. So when you're thinking about, I wish I could show something. When you're thinking about a concept, let's talk about people. So you will have a Getty, web page for Thomas More, right? And everything that's known about him. And that's still very kind of basic. But there's a second version of that actually regular users don't quite see, but that is only crafted for machines and for computers, right? And that version will point in all sorts of directions to talk about his family relationships, his students, his
History in the time period, what was going on during that time period, right?
Yeah, so it's really another layer. It's a different way of using the internet. And hopefully it's going to be more powerful. I mean, you can imagine that now everything that's, we think of the internet as a database, but, so the problems are multiplied by tenfold, right? But that's, giving meaning, specific meaning to entities, to concepts in the web, not just going to web pages. Is that helpful?
A web of connected relationships. Yeah.
But that makes it very important that you compose this in subject terms on a, say, picture by length of marshal. How extravagant and lengthy that gets in terms of directing people or forming clouds.
Yeah, the more you have, the better, but you still have to start somewhere. And I think better to get up there and get the content out there and add and augment what you have to it.
And so those terms are actually, they are super important. They're really kind of easy access points within our collections. But what I call clouds, you might call something else. So the Semantic Web will refer to it as a unique identifier, as a unique ID, and all of those different spellings point to the same concept, right? So no matter how, if I say Thomas More, or Diana says more Thomas, we're all pointing to the same concept, the same entity.
Yes, sir.
This is for Dr. Sale in the mail, or anybody can comment. There's a lot of hype, I understand, about, quote, artificial intelligence, neural networks, and deep learning in particular. Having said that, though, your work with machine vision and intricate interpretation is starting to lend itself well to some of the new work, some of the high performance renditions of some of the work that's being done. Can you comment on that and kind of help us with that, the connection to your work?
Yeah, progress in deep learning has been really astounding. It's really about managing problems at a scale that we haven't seen before. And the imaging technology feeds in underneath that, because the scale at which we are able to do the image collection, the image management, I mean, you've seen numbers up here that 10 years ago would be astounding. Millions of things in a collection. Our ability to manage that. I think we're going to see actually the diffusion of these new techniques into medicine, for example, with breakthroughs for diagnostic imaging using machine learning that we haven't seen before. Because the imaging technology I'm using to look at a scroll is at a level of resolution that far exceeds what's available medically. But you can imagine that if you could have a medical scan of your anatomy at micron level rather than millimeter level, and then if you could do learning within that to be able to identify abnormalities, cancers, for example, then that kind of diagnostic ability would be through the roof on what we can do right now. And how do you manage that scale? That's what the deep learning, machine learning kind of community is trying to learn how to do. So I think we're going to see a lot of that coming.
Is the pattern recognition work that you're trying to do with the scrolls, does that have a connection?
In fact, it does. That's the direction we've been moving to be able to solve the problem of the Herculaneum material, where the ink doesn't have a density, where the density alone can show up in a way for us to see it. But there are lots of other ways to be able to see those patterns. And we think that deep learning can be one of the ways. Yeah. Thanks for your question.
As I go around to small museums that are beyond, I realize the data that is in some of these small museums, and I long for them to be able to, number one, take care of it properly, and then number two, be able to share it someday, so that collaboration of the information can be done correctly. I know that money is a big problem with many of these small museums. They depend on volunteer value, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see a time in the future where this might be possible to, number one, make this software affordable and to make it standardized so that some of these small museums can jump on the ship to recording what they have as well as sharing it?
I think in most of our collaborative efforts, it's very important to us to share what we do. Even our small initiative of the digital distance cataloging interface, the DCI, all that code is available on GitHub. I think we're all trying to share what we're learning, make every bit of code available possible. We're working with GitHub to, many of us, even to share our records and data and links to images as well. So I think we're trying to help. I think, in my experience in the art world, in the art museum community, we managed to move forward with these collaborative initiatives funded by IMLS and Mellon, NEH, that's really how we've made all the progress that I've experienced since about 1996, so with the Amico project, through these government grants, and then we try to share what we're learning. It's often hard to reach out to the really tiny institutions, and through the small, like the Oklahoma Museum Association, I think that's a very good way that Oklahoma museums are working together. I'm also just helping out some different tribes just to share what bit I know and help them assess what they're doing. I mean, we rely on volunteers as well. You know, my biggest workforce are Gillies, volunteers, and graduate assistants. So we're all kind of struggling for money, but we're all trying to share. We just have to kind of, I guess, organize ourselves.
And it is, not to be slightly depressing at the end, but so in the museum pyramid, the art museums are up at the top and have the bulk of the money. And so really, you want to talk to institution about priorities. And while everyone here would agree that digitization and preserving these objects is the first order of business, if you don't have money to fix the cracks in your foundation, so you can't open your doors to school groups, you know, all over this country, right? There are 30,000 museums that are making decisions that have to do with, can we even open the doors? They don't, we did a study several years ago, and we polled small museums for their 3 biggest technology problems. And with small museums, the 3 biggest technology problems were, I don't know how to leave a voicemail message on the telephone. I don't know how to connect to the printer, and I don't know what a browser is. So, you know, so the 2 words I like are shared services. You know, how do we institute shared services across cultural heritage institutions?
Yeah, sticking to the concept of money. And this is to anybody. In terms since launching your Yale website, has that influenced positively, negatively, or neutrally the on-site visitation at your museum?
That's a great question. It's very clear that it has really improved our relationship with our audiences. We have a strong visiting scholar program that's been going on since 1977. Actually, the building we lived in, the museum, was built with visiting scholars' offices. I don't know if you can even picture it. I mean, of course now, you know, they're occupied by real staff members. But for the longest time, those visiting scholars would come and just, you know, make wild guesses about what we had in our collections. They now come fully prepared. In essence, they kind of jump-started their project by at least 2 months. They know exactly what works they want to look at. So, yes, that's been a very, very good benefit. But I think, you know, largely it's this idea of, so when we released our online catalog in 2011, we actually released only records, and then I will love this, objects for which the records were clean. We had only about 5,000 records that were clean. And what is clean? What's a finished catalog record? I don't know. So people were actually calling us up and saying, "Do you have more Turners than this?" I know it because I've been to the museum and I've seen those paintings. So it kind of backfired on us, literally. So within, you know, the year, we actually flipped the switch and released all 50,000 records for the art collection. The library, the rare books collection is also online, but of course has fewer images, but all of what they have cataloged is also online. So it's this kind of relationship that you have to establish with the audiences, right? It's trust. It's like, why are you withholding something? This is, right? Why? We know you're trying your best.
So how dirty were those records? So I want to know.
Well, and that's the constant battle, isn't it? That for years the curators would love to have, I want to review every record before you put it up. And when is that going to happen? Yeah. So,
Not in my lifetime.
But also coming back to this question of openness, basically, right? I think the question of money is right on target. So my 2 cents for this literally is, try and join a community of active participants in a collaborative or project, or even in the development of standards. So this is what really IIIF and the CRM community is all about. They don't cost me anything, they don't cost my institution anything, but keep abreast of where that's going. And that's kind of really critical, because I think it goes back to this idea of being well informed, right? And that's critical. Having somebody who can really kind of keep on top of the development, even if that's something you're going to reach in 10 years or 2 years, it doesn't matter. But having somebody who's going to be the champion for kind of enabling you a little bit and being the data kind of knowledge champion, that's really critical.
I think Holly made a really good point, though, with the really tiny institutions. I mean, you don't even have a person who has time to think about technology. The main memory, was it the main memory network? That was a really good example that was successful of how one fairly large institution, was it a history museum in Maine?
It's a lot, it was the library.
Was it the library?
Special collections within the library.
So they became kind of the hub of networking, not literally, but working with, I would say, all of the small memory institutions in the state, and then they basically kind of go out and help train you and even help do the work for you. They host it. You really kind of have to have a strong leader to help all the small institutions, but they've got a great presence, a lot of capturing all that good information, and it's working, but that might be a good model.
Again, the IMLS produces these national leadership projects, and so one of the suggestions that we've been making to the IMLS for years, if you're going to do a national leadership project, part of that ought to be adopt a couple of small institutions and see how it works with the, see how you can, and in general, we all would agree to do that. It's just hard because it's a federal project to figure out how you would organize that. We have more questions. Can I ask you to stand up come to the microphone so people can hear? And because that green is so cheery. Beautiful. Is it on? Oops. Huh? Is there a button? Oh. No. Okay. It's on. It says it's on now.
Oh, okay. Dr. Fields, I was curious about basically, can your technology looking at these wrapped items inside of them, if they use scale, like such a fine scale, can you do any kind of material analysis, like the way the inks react differently? I don't know if that's the best way to phrase this question, but could you do denser materials like ceramics and kind of look at the layers there and look at more material from that level? So.
The resolution of tomography is really, really good because the X-rays have such a very small wavelength, so spatial resolution can go down to below 1 micron. A micron is 1/1000th of a millimeter, so that's really tiny, silk fibers, for example. But the corresponding problem with tomography is that if you have something that's really dense, then it sort of obscures everything else, so then you lose the finer detail that you'd really like to be able to see. So if you have something that's pretty uniform in its density, everything will look pretty good, and if what you're looking for in ceramic, for example, is all about the density of ceramic, then you'll get good imaging for that. You'll be able to see all the layers and make analysis about that. But if you have something that's, say, in an iron box, and you want to scan through the box to be able to see what's inside, the iron is going to be the limiting factor on that. So I think there is actually, though, a lot of promise for making material judgments from very high resolution tomography, and it's underused. So I'd like to see more and more museums and libraries get the kind of equipment they need to be able to do the analysis. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Thanks.
So somebody else with a hand up. Would you come to the microphone, sir? Would you come to the microphone, please?
When you're digitalizing the collection, how about for three-dimensional objects like sculpture that often create volume around them or space? is there efforts being made to do that in 3D? And then my other question is, I've seen this one-time fieldbook where you have a virtual museum, so you walk in at your eye level, and you can look at things, you can zoom in, you can touch the screen, it'll show you provenance, attribution, it'll flip the picture around, you can see the back of it. Is that being pursued as something? It is archival in a sense, but it certainly enhances the experience when people can't afford membership to museums.
Emmanuel may want to talk about this as well. I've just been here for a little over 3 years, and with a goal of digitizing all 400,000 items, I'm all about numbers at the moment. I've done some sort of in the round imaging in the past, and it can be very effective and very helpful. It just takes a long time to do. And I think at some point we'll do some of that, at least to enhance what we're doing and maybe to help us get more money. I think it would be great to do. Just kind of about the numbers right now. And then we're going to talk to that.
I'm not really a digitization person, at least for the objects, but I can talk to the this notion of reusing that digital content, and virtual tour is a very good example. I think it really kind of emphasizes the importance of having a very good foundation for your digital assets, right? If you don't have good quality digital images and data, none of that layer of interpretation is going to be possible. And once you have that foundation layer, I mean, the world is open to you. But it's really critical to have that, obviously. It really is, but it's, there are some initiatives like this that really draw users more than others. And I do love those virtual tours. The Frick Collection in New York has a fantastic one. And we don't have one. But it's really kind of finding usage for your digital assets that will have the biggest impact, right? And that's definitely why we went with Google the first time around, is that we could not afford to pass out the PR coup that it was. I mean, and actually a lot of people find us through Google that way. So it's kind of strategizing almost what you can do with those beautiful high-res images and that data. But again, think about your policies. Is the institution okay with releasing all of that in the wild? Because it is the wild out there. There's a fun website called tineye.com where you can upload a picture of a painting from a museum and get result of how this painting has been reused in the wild. And so the famous example is Mona Lisa, right? Which will have a lot of derivatives, but it's fun. But it really hinges on an internal conversation. But are we okay doing this? The biggest obstacle for us at the museum actually was not so much, oh, we're going to lose money doing this. It was about how are people going to use our images. We didn't know, nothing bad has happened. I'm happy to say, but that was the obstacle, believe it or not. Yeah.
I'm curious how many of you have used a commercially available head-mounted display in the last 6 months? What's available now? Was it compelling for you?
No.
Not yet. So I feel that in the next 2 years, the pieces are going to come together. We're going to have compelling environments, probably for gaming.
Right.
But if you're interested in connecting with the younger generation, making sure the content is available for those devices is going to be huge. And the piece, we call it digitalization or digitization, so that your content is available for that is really important. And you should be thinking about how you can keep pace, because that will connect. We went to Venice 5 years ago with the family, and my son knew the streets because he'd been playing a video game that was set in medieval Venice. We'd never been there. He's like, Dad, have you ever been to Venice? It's confusing, right? So that's what I'm talking about, right? If your content can play in that space, then that's really good for you as a museum.
Joe's son is about ready to do that too, I think.
I'm not gonna, but you gotta go up to the microphone.
Gotta let Zachary.
I've had my instructions. Everybody said,
This was really just a test because she cut me off yesterday. Now, I just run, I don't even know what they're called. I'm embarrassed at the technical conference. It's a little square thing that you can take a picture of and it'll give you a lot of other, I mean, it's kind of like a barcode.
Barcodes.
Okay. How hard is it and how to get it in the museums where we can go up to a painting and take our phones and look at that and get history, artist history?
That's pretty straightforward. It's even.
You know, I don't see it in a lot of museums yet. Is it expensive?
I don't think so. I mean, it's commercially available technology. What may be more interesting is that you can simply do recognition on the photo itself.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have any markings, and by having that in your database, the recognition is good enough that you can usually find what you're looking for and then provide the extra information.
That's really kind of what we're doing now. But the hard part is the foundation. We have to have written and produced some information, descriptions, writing, educational materials about that content so that you can get the information.
But this represents the acceleration of the technology. I mean, we had barcodes, and then we went to these QR codes. The idea was we can't recognize the real world automatically, so we'll just label everything, and then we'll be able to recognize it. Well, now we can actually recognize faces and pieces of art and brands, and we can go directly from them into a database. So the question becomes, semantic web-like, what's the concept that you're really after once you do that? And that's now where all of the work is being done.
Sorry, those QR codes are fairly easy to crank out. As Diana said, you know, it's really thinking about what you can do with a digital device that would be different from what you do in a gallery in front of a paper label, right? So there's a lot of content creation behind that. And that's expensive, that's time consuming, and it's also, you know, put that in the context of faculty members who work for tenure, right? Writing for digital labels just doesn't get them anywhere. I mean, I'm sorry.
well, and in fact, it's not terribly satisfying either that, you know, that we've got this disconnect in a world that for 10 years has wanted short pieces of it, short, punchy pieces, and you've got curators who spent their entire lives learning deep stories. And so, you know, again, maybe it's a people issue. You pair a younger scholar with an older scholar, transmit knowledge and work.
That's a good point. I think Zachary had a question. Could we take his?
We can take Zachary's question.
Oh, good.
I probably don't need a microphone. You had briefly discussed the American Art Collaborative a little bit, but I was wondering if you could perhaps explain maybe why that kind of collaboration is important in means of sharing data between institutes and how that would eventually affect the general public. And also, would that kind of collaboration, although it's specific to American art, what that might mean for other disciplinary fields in the future, and also other artistic mediums.
Two questions there. We probably should have brought a few slides about LinkedIn and data. No, I didn't think of that. But you want to start? We wanted to have a critical mass of information about American art. So we've got the Smithsonian American Art Museum started this, and they have already been experimenting with putting their information in linked open data form and enriching their own records with data from New York Times, other institutions. They have rich content already published in the Semantic Web. So now we've got also the Archives of American Art, and is it what, 13 museums total? And we one of them, we have historical information archives as well as art information and archaeology information as also. So we'll be one of the first entities, I think, to have a critical mass of information about art with related archives on the Semantic Web. As a part of this collaboration, we're also developing some interfaces because those don't really exist yet. Even though we have grand ideas about, saying you can ask new questions and get real answers, but we don't really have kind of that in-between application software to make that work. So we're experimenting with that as well, so that we will at least have one or two possible interfaces to help people use the semantic web. So the idea is, all in New York Times, pretty much. I'm not sure if that's all the historical information, but it's on the semantic web. A lot of help information is on the semantic web, library. There's just a wealth of information already out there. Now we have to harness it, and will be kind of an example that other groups can follow to get critical masses of information out there. That's what you're saying.
I'd say that, the driving force behind the AAC is really also recognizing that commercial search engines just don't do justice to the cultural heritage sector. If I'm asking Google, if I'm asking Google, give me all the paintings after Turner, I will get 100,000 pages in less than 1 second. Oh yeah, but none of those results are actually going to be very smart. I will get, pages back, not meaning I'll get pages that carry the terms Turner after painting, but in all kind of different order. So it's actually not really answering my question at all. So it's really kind of this frustration that the AAC is trying to start providing a solution to. And it is going to be, I was going to quote that, but more of a model for other disciplines, right? With the British Art Center, we part of the AAC. We have a few American art paintings, but yeah, you could expand the model to any other discipline, really. But it's really looking at how can we get our data to work harder for us. We're doing fantastic job cataloging right and left. We're doing fantastic job digitizing our collections, and yet we still end up with kind of simple web pages. Asking a question across multiple institutions that is really, really, really hard. So there's a gap between what we provide to the internet right now and what the internet can reflect back on us.
Yeah, and it's hard to do this new kind of cataloging. I find it really difficult. One of the reasons Yale is part of this project is because they've been doing it for quite a while and they're helping to train us. But we're using a software called Karma from USC that is automating a lot of the process. So another part of this project is so that we can learn how to do this new kind of cataloging for the internet, provide information that allows connections to be made about history of the time period, about relationships between artists, between paintings, between institutions, between cultures, events. We don't, it's a really hard, deeper level of cataloging.
But we just don't do it, do we? We certainly don't, we concentrate on describing the object, right? And forget to, what has been cataloging as we know it for the longest time is really kind of basic metadata to be able to identify objects specifically, so that we know that a portrait of this unknown man is not the same as this one, right? So we measure them, we index the materials for the frames and paintings and whatnot. But that data really wasn't meant to be public facing, so we're trying to kind of craft more elegant and more facile web pages, but that's still not quite answering the way we live our lives, the way those objects live their lives, which is through narratives. Again, it's all, we're all connected, and those objects go from hand to hand. And so this is what kind of Lingala is trying to show to us, right? This is a promise.
And I think with that notion that we've added elegance to our list of criteria, and I think everyone this week has provided elegant solutions to problems we either didn't know that exist or we're happy to learn about. And we're going to bring it to a close. I'd like to ask Dr. King to come up to close the symposium.
And I think speakers who don't have to catch planes will be around for a few minutes to answer questions.
Thank you, Holly, and thank all of you. Before we go, I would like to thank those who made this possible, beginning with our 10 speakers, some of whom traveled great distances to be with us this weekend and share their experience and expertise and discoveries. We can only imagine, since I think we all recognize that we're at the beginning of the technological revolution as opposed to the end of it, we can only imagine what new discoveries will be presented in the years ahead and how important those will be in the study of museum collections. I'd also like to thank our staff who worked so hard on this symposium, Dr. Nevin Panther, Program Manager, and Carol Ellington, our Administrative Assistant. Those two did the majority of the work to make this possible. Also, our Gilcrease, that's our volunteer organization, who work day in and day out for the museum and make the museum what it is. I'd also like to thank our sponsors. Through the generous funding from the John Stewart Family Foundation and Laredo Petroleum, we're able to bring programs like this to you. And last but not least, I would like to thank our audience. I want to thank all of you for participating in this symposium. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and hope that you will be back for our next symposium in the spring. So let's give all of those people a round of applause.